Good evening, everyone. It's about 5 o'clock. Okay. I'll call this meeting to order. Lorain City School Academic Distress Commission regular meeting on this Monday, September 17th, 2018 at 5 p.m. Roll call.
Mr. Coffin?
Present.
Mr. Richardson?
Here.
Dr. Solis? Present.
Public comment. Approval of the June 18th, 2018 meeting minutes. Want to make a motion? Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Roll call.
Mr. Coffin?
Yes.
Mr. Richardson?
Yes.
Dr. Solis?
Yes.
Approval of the agenda. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Roll call.
Mr. Coffin?
Yes.
Mr. Richardson?
Yes.
Dr. Solis?
Yes.
And at this time, we'll turn it over to the CEO, Mr. David Hardy, for managerial updates.
Good evening, Academic Distress Commission, those in the audience. Hope you're having a great week so far. First, I would like to say, first and foremost, those that were affected by Hurricane Florence in the Carolinas and on the East Coast, I wish them a path to recovery. We know how challenging those times are, and just want to recognize that that there are many people that have you on your hearts and minds. So for those that are affected by that and those family members that may be affected by that, please know that you are on our hearts and in our prayers. With that said, I want us also to move to some of the managerial updates, and illuminated by a lot of data points that we've looked at the past year. Just want to recap some of the things that we experienced so we understand the transformational shifts that we made this year and the intent behind them before we jump into some of those managerial updates. The reason why I start there and want to start here around some data points is the question that has often come up around why did we make the changes that we made? Questions around why do we have 2 deans, a turnaround principal, why are there just new structures in place, why do we have these new initiatives? And I want to just point to a few facts that have remained to be true over the past few years. We realize that academically, we're not where we want to be. I think that is something that we would all recognize as a challenge that is ahead of us, that we're ready to tackle given some of the changes we made this year, in addition to the fact that our kids aren't showing up every single day. We had 38.8% of our kids that were chronically absent, now what they consider habitually absent under House Bill 410. We realize those 2 pieces, if our kids aren't showing up and academically performing, we're not going to be where we want to be. However, we are encouraged by some of the shifts that we are making that will actually change the path that we want to see. Specifically, we received a number of comments this beginning of the year from teachers, from staff members who are very excited about the changes that we've made, to the point where I think for the first time in 16, 17 months, I got a very positive email that indicated the fact that they appreciated the additional presence in hallways, the additional support around culture, the ability to now focus on my classroom versus all of the other distractions. I think that should be recognized, and kudos to all of our teachers and leaders, both at the school site and in the district, that have made that happen. I think it's a work in progress. I think it's a huge step forward, and I thank them for all the hard work that they've done for receiving that email. I think that says a lot. At the same time, we realize that we have a lot of growth still to do. We're far from perfect. I don't think we've done everything right yet, but I think part of the process is to continue to improve, and we will get there one step at a time. With that said, the question really was brought to ask, you know, what is this leadership structure? What does it look like? What is it intended to do? So, academic distress commissioners, in your packet on the right-hand side, there should be a school leaders who's who packet that outlines and gives you insight of who the actual faces of those leaders at each one of our school buildings. Each one of our school buildings, as you all know, has a turnaround principal, a dean of scholar and family engagement, and a dean of academics who are charged with addressing a very specific area within the school and in the school transformation. And I thought it was important that you just had a copy of the faces so you could be able to kind of see them if you see them around, know who they are, and put a face with the school and a name. With that said, it also behooves us to understand them a little bit more deeply. What is it that they are targeted or expected to do as being a support within the school? One of the things that we've outlined for you is for you just to have a little bit of insight of what those roles look like. If you look at, there's a staple packet that has expenditure comparison behind that packet, whereas who's who, it should be a staple packet that says expenditure comparisons at the top. Give you a second to navigate to them. That page we're going to get to in a second, but if you go to the page right behind it, there's something called the leaderboard. Now this leaderboard is still in draft form, and I wanted to bring it to the ADC to get comments and questions before we brought it to our school leaders to get a little bit deeper understanding of how this will work. But the intent of this document is to start to triangulate the data points in which will align the work of those three leaders. So, for example, our Dean of Scholar and Family Engagement, they're individuals who are dealing with the well-being of our kids, the connection to our families. What are those data points that we as a district should be holding them accountable for and be looking at on a regular basis to say that they're doing a great job? And therefore, who is the district owner at the same time who is ensuring that those things are happening at the school site? So this the leaderboard is something that will be articulated to our school leaders in more depth. They haven't seen this yet. Again, I wanted to bring it to you first. But they have been communicated around the three areas in which they're focusing. The academic branch, the effort branch, and the behavior element. Those are the three big buckets that we're focusing our time and energy for a couple of different reasons. Academics and effort and behavior are the three areas in which are also outlined on standards-based grading report cards, K-8, and we want that same alignment to be there for our school leaders and for our district, of course, for things to be streamlined and aligned as much as possible. And what you see in front of you from an academic lens, you see the data points that we want to look at as a district and as a school in between state report cards, so we know how we're progressing throughout the year. And you'll see things in there as, how often are we getting in and out of classrooms, to how many standards aligned lessons are we seeing given the data we've seen in years past where only 17% of our lessons were actually standards aligned, to how we're performing on our interim assessments and other things. So we can just start to understand what's going on during the year and make adjustments along the way. That most of the academic components you will see there, they're in a slightly darker color there. You'll see the district driver, and if you turn the page to the next page, you'll see the actual school driver. So you'll see the turnaround principal, the dean of academics, hold a lot of the responsibility for our academic components. As you move forward to the effort components, which are largely around our scholars being in dress code, and I have to tip my hat to all of our elementaries and especially the strides our high school is making with getting our kids in dress code every single day. I think it's really nice to see our kids showing their pride through their dress code. With that said, there's a team of folks that spend a significant amount of time and energy to ensure that happens, and a lot of that is put into what we're considering our effort component, or how we're measuring effort throughout the day and throughout the year. You'll see in there under dress code, you'll also see our scholars coming on time, you'll see our teachers being in school and being in school every day and on time, and you'll see our scholars who are missing 30 or 60 hours and how that equivocates to what we expect is excellent, what it looks like if kids are there every single day, and it's excellent for a school to have less than 10% versus a school that has more than 20% going. You see the difference in score that they would receive. Then the last part is behavior, and that relates to having our kids in school versus out of school. We understand the challenge we have when our scholars make bad choices. Of course, they need to be consequenced. At the same time, we want to support our kids before they get to a position where they are compromising their educational well-being for the choices that they make, and sometimes bad choices. So we want to track our kids that are being suspended and why, and for those kids who are doing the right thing, how do we celebrate that as well? So those are the three areas that we attach to those positions at a school site. Again, academics mostly, our dean of academics and turnaround principal. Some of our effort and behavior grades align with the dean of scholar and family engagement a little bit more because it's a lot of the behavior and cultural elements, but that is the impact they will have. Now, 20 plus days into a school year, it's hard to measure how much of an impact they've had in those areas, but it is interesting to note that we've had a slight uptick in our enrollment at this point. We're also figuring through some attendance numbers, and we should see actually an improvement in our overall attendance in time. And the biggest thing and most notable thing we've been able to see is the increased number of our scholars in their Titan Pride every single day, and us addressing school culture in a more robust manner. So those are the elements around managerial pieces, around the structure of our schools at our school site, and the alignment all the way up to the district level offices that are detailed here. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a few questions. First, just on the practical building level side of the work, what does sort of the observation and coaching cycles look like? And the second part of that question is, how often do we give building leaders feedback and an opportunity to sort of engage with the staff so that the staff has an expectation of what's expected? Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. I'm going to have Dr. Brown speak a little bit to that, but I'll give you a quick overview of the direction we would like to go to. We heard loud and clear, especially our building leaders last year, weren't getting the type of support and feedback traditionally that they should, and therefore we restructured the way we look at professional development for our leaders during the summer and then also during the year. But then specifically the feedback that they receive is led mostly by Dr. Brown and supported by Mr. Bishop in their given roles. But Dr. Brown, if you want to expand about how our leaders are receiving feedback and the frequency and what that looks like.
Specifically, can you hear me? Perfect. Welcome. Thank you. Specifically, what leader feedback looks like. Actually, Keenan and myself and Arlo, as we go and visit schools, we're actually at a school today. While we were there, we walked classrooms with the principal and the two deans, looking for standards aligned instruction, looking for the rigor of the text that they were using. And after that, we go and debrief with the team, both our individual classrooms, so that like what we can see, and then school-wide trends, thinking about that. So that process happens with leaders individually, regularly. It also happens once a month. Last Thursday, we have a monthly principals and deans meeting, and during that 2 hours is spent walking classrooms and then debriefing what we saw in classrooms, so that across the district we have a norm sense of what high quality instruction looks like. So we alternate each month. This month we were at an elementary building. Next month we'll be at a secondary site, either a middle or a high school, and then we go back to elementary, back to secondary, so that all the leaders are getting a sense of what our instruction looks like, K through 12. On the teacher front, each principal and dean has been tasked with being very visible and present in classrooms regularly. And we're defining regularly. We want to make sure each teacher receives a visit and some feedback, bi-weekly, so every 2 weeks. From how we're doing that, the first 4 weeks, we're entering week 5 right now, but the first 4 weeks were really around deans and principals getting in together and getting in individually so that they could norm on like what, as a leadership team, their vision of high quality instruction would be. Because what we didn't want, the benefit of having 3 leaders in a building is like we have 3 leaders, but a downside could be if 3 leaders were giving 3 different messages. So we wanted to make sure that they went and did these walks together so that they could be normed. And the first 4 weeks they focused on just the culture, the routines, the transitions, the hallways. And now we're moving more into the just actual academic instructional practices.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. And if I could, and I don't know if you have a follow-up question, Mr. Richardson, but if I could just no, you're fine, thank you. If I could just illuminate a couple other pieces that I think are so important in this shift. I think part of the challenge has been the lack of coordinated messaging. And so for a long time, a lot of our leaders were getting very different messages, and therefore their messages to teachers became different, and then the frustration from our teachers just was exacerbated because of it. Mm-hmm. I think the second piece of that reality is that we didn't have the dream team that we have now, honestly. I think the specificity and expertise that they bring to our district is unique, and we have this opportunity to draw on that to help build our leadership teams in a more cohesive and comprehensive way than we have in years past. For example, a lot of leaders have been itching to do X, or they've been itching to focus on writing, or they've been itching to really focus on standard-based lessons, but they haven't had the support from the district office to create and push on those very important issues. And with the support of our chief team, they've been able to do so. And then third, which I think has been a really big boost for us, is the support of our state support team, who has met with us multiple times around how do we align all of our structures to some of the things the state has already asked us to do on a regular basis, so that it's not another thing. One of the big messages that I got last year from a lot of teachers were questions around the form, right? There was this form that a lot of teachers were worried about in their TBTs, and so they were always completing these forms versus it's really getting our teachers to look at our scholar work and really build off of what our scholars know or don't know, and then improve instruction on a daily basis, and then roll that up to the building level, and then of course to the district level. The state support team has done a tremendous job to help us rethink that and align with our direction that we're seeing and supporting every single day.
So I wanted to add another piece to that. So obviously when we came in last year, there were big concerns around the type of instruction in in the different classrooms, and depending on what classroom you went to, what building, what class, during a particular time of the week, you would see different things out there, whether it was worksheets, whether it was movies. There was no sort of alignment in terms of, or any type of sort of strategy around sort of curriculum and implementation of that. Can you speak a little bit about how we I wouldn't want to use the word monitoring, but more of how do we know what teachers are teaching?
So there's a few things, and I'll call on Mr. Bishop in a minute to speak a little bit to standard-based grading a bit, because I think it speaks to that very question. I think that anecdote is right. I think last year we saw a lot of things being taught, and to no fault, I think, to any teacher. I think they were absolutely giving everything they could to be successful in the classroom. I just don't think there was a unified understanding of what was expected. And by moving to standard-based grading, our attempt was to say, okay, take everything that every tool that's in your toolbox that you're pushing on, and let's align it to the expectations that our state is asking of us, and put it in a way where we can not only see standard-based grading or standard-based lessons in classrooms, we can actually evaluate how much our kids are actually learning against the standard. So that shift is very challenging, and we're right in the middle of it, so I will say there will be some challenges along the way, but I think the philosophy around it is to get us back to the expectations that are set forth by the state, aligned to state standards, and that will guide the way that we think about teaching and learning. Mr. Bishop, if you could just expand upon the little bit of the standard-based grading component of it, and how we're approaching that, and how that impacts what we want to see and what we're going to see in classrooms.
Thank you. Standards-based grading is really a mindset shift as opposed to a program, right? So if I know what the state actually requires for my third grader, I'm going to be able to determine if my third grader is achieving that, right? So I don't want a third grade student who's receiving A's and B's to get to the place where it's time to take a state assessment. And they take a state assessment, and because their comprehension is not where it needs to be, the way that they respond to reading at their grade level isn't where it needs to be, and then they end up being held back, right? I'm a parent, and as a parent, that would be heartbreaking for me to experience. So what we have done is we've utilized performance level indicators that align to exactly what the state expects. It tells us what a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, and a 5 is. And we have our grade scale to actually match that. So I can look as a teacher and I can say, this scholar is actually proficient because the grade level standard has actually been met, right? The child can go beyond that, or they can be working towards it. So we have the guidance for our testing grades around those performance level indicators. So the teacher is able to clearly talk to a parent and say, no, Johnny hasn't gotten there yet. They're at a basic level because this is what the standard is asking for Johnny to demonstrate, but this is the work that we can do to move them beyond that.
So can I ask you a follow-up question? Are you prepared to, or should I direct it towards you, Mr. Hardy, or? Okay. In terms of sort of the implementation of this standard-based grading, obviously this is something new to the district. What has the sort of professional development and then sort of the coaching around the implementation at the building level for principals, and then also the principals' engagement with teachers, so that expectation is one in which it's aligned and we know where the rubber hits the road? How has that been sort of navigated? And do you feel as though, obviously it's going to take time, but do you feel as though there's been support at the building level with principals and the deans as well as with teachers?
Yeah, I think with the initiative being part of our overall picture and overall structure, there's been support. I don't know that at this point there's there's a level of comfort that says I'm at a 10, right? That I can go out there and I won't have to work my way through. What I can talk to you about is the process that our leaders undertook over the summer. We actually did provide a layout for what standards-based grading looked like, what the thought process behind standards-based grading was, the shift from doing averages, means, to actually using mode, looking at the journey of standards-based grading, so not being averaged based on every single assignment that a child gets, right? But assuming that a child at the beginning of the school year is not going to be proficient, right? But knowing that you're working throughout the school year to get them to a place of proficiency. And we did work that required some changes, right? So what are we going to do with extracurricular? Are we going to keep extracurricular? Are we going to get rid of it? What are we going to do with descriptive feedback, right? And if homework is given, what feedback are we going to put on homework? So that initial work was done with our deans of academics, actually all of our deans and then our principals. There was a PD that was provided to our teachers that worked with performance level descriptors that I've mentioned, that 1 through 5 scale,
Right.
and also the shifts, some of the work that would need to be done around standards-based grading. And as we've been walking through it and working through it, we've added a couple layers. So there's a handbook, I think, that's in front of you that provides guidance with some of the specifics, right? But it is very much a work in progress in that it's going to take being in the classroom, right? Doing the work, having your performance level indicators in hand, having the student's assignment in hand, and looking and saying, okay, this is a 2, this is a 3. So I would say we're moving in the right direction. And if I'm a teacher in the classroom, I'm excited because I know I can have the right conversations with parents, but I'm nervous because I'm so used to doing this a different way,
Absolutely.
right? And I'm going to have to be uncomfortable as we work through this process.
If I may add, I'm sorry, to be a follow-up question to that. Thank you, Mr. Bishop. I think Mr. Bishop is spot on with many of those points, and I think here's the reality of the situation. And not to put Mr. Coughlin on the spot, but on the other side, you know, he's a high school teacher receiving a lot of kids from K to 8, I know I've heard, not necessarily from Mr. Coughlin, but from other high school teachers, I am receiving kids who are not prepared, and for whatever reason, they are not ready for high school, and so I'm playing catch up. Right? I'm playing catch up constantly versus if we're able to double down and focus on the academic rigor and the standards derived lessons in elementary and middle school, our kids will be better prepared for Mr. Coughlin's class. So we realized that we had to shift the way that we think about grading and supporting the development of our kids now. Now at the same time, I think we compromised some of the time and energy and the rollout that's necessary for this to go extremely smooth because we no longer could wait for our kids and for our teachers to catch up to our kids' needs. We had to push forward because at the end of the day, there are kids, unfortunately, I still see, which over time we will reduce the number of kids that have this experience, but I still see kids in high school who are very nice kids. They're well-behaved kids, but they're undereducated kids. And because they're very nice, and because they behave very well, they were given those A's and B's that Mr. Bishop is speaking to versus actually being graded on the educational attainment that they've received. So when you see a report card and you see A's and B's, but then you look at the background of their state test results and you see limited, there's a disconnect there. And I think this is attempting to address that in a more holistic way. Other questions?
You referenced Steve. I just want to know if you had any comment.
Well, the kids that come into my classes,
I can't hear you.
the kids that come into my classes are CCP students. I teach, my schedule is CCP through the college. So some of the obstacles that the core teachers have, I don't see, to be very honest with you. I'm blessed in that respect that my students come in, they can read, they can write, they are, I use the term, they're hungry. They come to class and they want to learn. So some of the obstacles that my colleagues face on a consistent basis, I've jumped that piece. I can see, though, that could be helpful to get those necessities done for those. And then even some of my students, I mean, it can't hurt, but I'm blessed in the fact that I don't deal with some of the obstacles in that respect, and that's, you know, and that's a good thing for me.
Right. Right. And for your kids.
And for my kids.
Yeah.
You know, they come with the desire to. They come with the desire that they you know, that they're, like I said, they're hungry. And that's something that is, if they have that desire to be successful, I think that's, if we could figure a way to unlock that piece, a lot of the things that we would do would be much more successful, because, you know, it's like anything else. If you want to do something, the chances are you're going to be much more successful doing it.
I think you raise a good point, that unlocking that hunger, right? I think you bring up a great point, because I think an A might have masked that desire. If I'm getting an A for just sitting in class, well, I guess that's as hungry as I need to be, right? Versus I think the standard-based grading shift is saying academically you're here, you're giving great effort, great, keep that going, or your character is great, your core value alignment is great, but we have to work on this element. It becomes more specific to what our kids need, and may ignite that flame, to use another analogy, that is necessary for that hunger, so that, you know, we have more, maybe not in his, I don't think Mr. Calder wants more kids in his class per se, but more kids going down that pathway of being successful and hungry.
And I wanted to add one more thing. So I really want to go back, you know, I know we're under the managerial sort of items, and I'm really sort of, I just want to get a better understanding, I guess, of sort of how we're going to support teachers in terms of the implementation. I know that, I think Spawn made a great sort of, gave me a good overview of sort of the observation and coaching, the sort of classroom walkthroughs, the visits, the culture routine, hallways transition, but help me understand sort of, there's only so many people at the building, at the sort of central office level, in terms of the chiefs in your team. There's only so many leaders, or building leaders at the building level. Are there any peer-to-peer supports for teachers who may feel comfortable, that can sort of be sort of pushed out to help and aid other teachers? Because I guess, I mean, this is obviously very new, and the feedback I'm getting is that teachers, it's new, right? And so what does that support look like? And really help me understand that we're going to give them a proper coaching, and that we can be sort of creative in terms of what that coaching looks like.
Yeah, I think
because we're then at the top.
Right. I think there's a few things you're pointing out. If I heard you correctly, what does that, you know, the capacity to continue to support our teachers, especially those that are grappling with this for the first time, and then what does that look like over time, right, is what I hear. I think I'll start with the overtime piece. I think this is something that will take time, and we're lending the grace that's necessary to do this right. So, you know, we're even thinking about now, we have our first interim grades coming out in the next few days. We realize, let's make sure we get this right. We also are working through a few glitches, so we might actually say, you know what, let's move this a week out so we can get this right, because we know there's time and grace that's necessary to do this the right way. So that's one, on time. As far as the support, I think it's a few things that we started to find, and we'll find pretty quickly. We'll find the teachers that are completely bought in and want to be a part of that transition. Part of that group is our teacher executive advisory network that we created earlier this year, where we've identified and put out for teachers who want to be more deeply part of the change. And we were lucky to get about 16 or 17 applicants that would like to be a part of that. So they will be part of the champions of this shift. And we'll be able to speak to some of these challenges while also giving us that meaningful feedback and pushing us to make sure that we're going about this the right way, thoughtfully, but with a sense of urgency. And the third is, honestly, we realized this first run through, and again, this interim, kind of benchmark of report card grades, and not the full report card, but just like halfway through, we'll be able to step back and look at the feedback that we get from our teachers through this process and get better by report card time. So I think those are the avenues we're looking at, but again, open to suggestions to hear how we can even do it better over time, because again, we want to get this right. We just also know the urgency at the same time.
Absolutely. Yeah, trying to build a shift like a flying line. Any other questions from the commission? If not, we'll move to instructional updates.
Great. So in your folders, we started to touch on this a little bit, is the standard-based grading handbook, but you'll see in here In short, when you have some time to read through it, you'll see some deeper understanding of what we're pushing on and why. So again, standard-based grading will be made up of 3 grades, one that's based on standard mastery, the second is based on scholar effort, and the third that's based on core values or character of our young people, those being the 3 main buckets. But in this package, you'll see how you can achieve a 5 in each of those levels, why we use that 5-point scale, and the assessments that will be used to actually see the growth of our young people over time, all the way down to how we look at homework differently, how we'll look at makeup work, and all the pieces that are necessary for us to think about this holistically. Again, this is a working and living and breathing document, and something that I think we are very proud to put in front of you now, but at the same time realize as we move further and further into standard-based grading, we'll realize that we'll have to tweak it and build some nuance to some of our statements and our approach, at the same time keeping the integrity of why we're doing standard-based grading, and that is to get to a deeper level of rigor and educational attainment for all of our kids starting at an earlier age. So this document is the embodiment of that. One piece that Mr. Bishop alluded to that I just want to highlight, when we look at standard-based grading, and again, most people are focused on that standard mastery grade, that first grade, 1 to 5. The shift there, the nuance there, is that we want our kids to have multiple opportunities to try to master a standard, right? It's not just one attempt at mastering a standard, it's a multiple attempt at mastering a standard, and we're looking at the most frequent score that they receive to be put on that report card versus the average. So say, for example, just to elicit that or kind of illuminate on that a little bit, if I received a 1 on my first assignment, a 2 on my next assignment, but then I got 3 5s in a row, that's the most common score, so that 5 is my score. If I would have averaged that, my score would be a lot lower and wouldn't necessarily tell us how I'm performing right now. It would be an average over time. So if it was the first time I received this information, I probably am going to score a 1, but that doesn't give me the true indication of where I am now. So that's one of the biggest shifts and probably the most challenging shifts that I think our teachers are grappling with right now. But that's the biggest change that we're going to see.
And so in terms of, syncopating the standards-based grading with the curricular pieces, how is that sort of being navigated? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that, what I'm asking is that how do we know, or that there's evidence of the proper curriculum in place, so that when the teachers go down this journey, they're all sort of uniformed in terms of, the grade and sort of the feedback they give to students?
Yep. I think the alignment will take a little bit of time, but I do think we have done a more comprehensive, or created a more comprehensive approach to the curricular resources that teachers will have available. Right. So the yellow folders that are inside your blue folders, I'm sorry, we've inundated you with a tree or two, but we wanted to make sure that you had the documents. And Mr. Bishop, you might need to illuminate some of the pieces that I might miss. But in short, in this yellow folder, you will see just an example of the text that our kids in the 6th grade class or 6th grade would actually do. So across all of our middle schools, this is given to all of our 6th grade teachers, and they could see the stories that align to the specific standards that are expected to be taught during that period of time. And so as we look at, so for example, this 6th grade text, these are the pages that are in our actual textbook of all those stories, and then they've received a SAS, which outlines the actual standards that are to be taught during that it's our sequence of assessed standards that are in that 9-week period, and therefore they're backwards mapped to these stories, and therefore as they're building their lesson plans, they pull from the anthology, they see the standards that are being taught, and then they have a way to assess their mastery of them along the way.
And this may be, again, excuse me for my ignorance, are principals or deans sort of evaluating lesson plans, or are lesson plans submitted so that way at the building level they know that this lesson plan is aligned with what we gave you? Or is it sort of every teacher for themselves?
So it's somewhere a little bit more in between, and Mr. Bishop could speak to it. We realized the challenge and shift in that, right? So we thought long and hard about, everyone take this lesson plan template at this time on this page and those type of things, but we also realized that stifles teacher creativity and the license and science behind teaching and learning, so we didn't want to go all the way down that road. But we also realized we didn't want to say, the world is yours, figure it out. And so if Mr. Bishop, you can just speak to kind of where we landed in the middle, that'd be helpful.
So there are criteria and expectations around what makes a lesson quality. And there are also high quality resources that have been created and put together by some great folks like Student Achievement Partners. The reference that Mr. Hardy made was in the Anthology Alignment Project. So when you're looking through those 6th grade texts, they actually match up with several of the stories that are in the anthology that we have. But the plans that have been put in place have been created over a course of time, right? And it breaks down the standards that are included. It has text-dependent questions. It's got high-quality text so that you're actually able to focus on the meatiest part of that text. So as opposed to maybe reading a passage or a text in one day, this text may span for 5 days, right? But it breaks down how you're actually going to spend your time with that text, delving into those juiciest parts so that you're getting the most robust experience of the instruction. We've required or laid the expectation that our teachers are able to then write in what we're calling equity moves. So in the past, they've been referred to as engagement strategies, right? So it's not just about the question that you ask, but it's about the task that you have the scholars centered around and how they engage in it. So we're going to utilize the Think, Pair, Share. We're going to do a quick write. Are you going to be working in a small group? Are you going to be able to have your individual description of what you believe the gist of this passage is, and then you're going to share that with your partners, and then you're going to come up with one that you put together, right? So it's how do you actually engage the scholars around the materials that are placed in front of them. So we do not require a set template, but what we've done is giving you the expectation of what high quality looks like, and have given you resources that you can pull from and then write your equity moves into.
We also realized that over time we had a chance to look at, are we moving in the right direction? And if we are, what are our proof points to tell us that this is the right direction? And it started with a conversation we had a few weeks ago. State support team was with us. We had OD on the line, and we actually started to really dive pretty deep into our 2017 school report card grades, right? So not this year's, but last year's, and look at each individual scholar and how they were performing on different standards and then different tasks they were asked. And correct me if I'm wrong, the grade level in which 0 of our kids received any points in writing, was that 3rd or 8th? I can't remember the grade.
3rd grade.
3rd grade, where any writing that was done, we received 0 points. So that says, to Mr. Bishop's point, we have to get into the core of what our kids really need to understand and then write to it in a way that we haven't in the past.
This is district-wide?
District-wide.
No 3rd grader?
Right.
Correct. So when we looked at it, we said, wow, okay, we're on the right track, right? Because we said, you know, we realized that it's a huge shift to get our kids and teachers to dive deep in the text, let alone write about it, right? Because there's a lot of pieces that go into that. So we needed to find a way to get them to the text, make it a little bit more intuitive to get to this point, but then get our kids writing, right? It's just an example. So that's just one example of many that we really pulled out of that session, but it was really eye-opening to see that we're missing major components of instruction because we haven't been organized in a way like we are now.
And that example that you gave us was from 2017, 2018.
Correct, from 2017, 2018.
So didn't our report card just come out from?
Yeah, so the
Are we
new
gonna
one.
Talk about that at some point.
Yeah, so our new report card just came out. So that was the 2017, 2018, like that was last year's report card. So it would have been the 2016, 2017 school
Okay.
year. So it was the year prior. But this report card, this actual report card just came out. And those data points we're still kind of crunching and looking through, only because we didn't have enough time, turnaround time to really dive into those results for this past year. We didn't present it or didn't bring it to this table today. But those same sentiments, those same pieces are probably indicative of the instruction that we saw last year. Hence why, you know, when we did our audit last year, 17% of our lesson plans were standards aligned, and, you know, less than half of our teachers felt they were getting the support they needed to be successful in the classroom. So those results are probably very similar. Hence why this past spring and this summer, we spent so much time trying to get this right for this year.
So can we expect to see a review of that report card at our next meeting?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to keep us moving then to just the operational side, or do you want to go to instruction?
Let's go, I want to go, yeah, I thought you had more to present there, but so I just had a question about sort of students who may, and I think we talked on the phone about this, but just publicly, I think it's important for the record that we talk about students who may be at risk of not graduating or who may not have enough credits. Can you talk about the district strategy around that?
Yeah, so we had a meeting last, I guess about a week ago. We met with our 11th and 12th grade director, our building administrator, and our executive director, and a few of our chiefs were in the meeting as well to start to unpack where our scholars are who are on pace for or not on pace for graduation. Granted, flashback just for 15 seconds, we had that conversation last year. We started that in like February, so we realized we needed to start earlier this year. And we found a couple of trends that are starting to play out over with our 4 cohorts that are in our high school now. We have about half of our high school scholars who have all the credits, are on pace, and will be fine for graduating. Like if we were to graduate today, we would feel comfortable they'll be ready.
About half.
About half. We have another 25% or maybe 30% that have the credits but really need that push to get over the finish line through just some intensive and support. We have the graduation guardians and all these other pieces that will help support our kids. And then we have another 20-25% of kids who will need a lot more than just credits. They'll need they'll need work keys or credentialing to really support them to get them across the stage. The other kind of troubling statistic we found as we start to unpack those 3 different buckets of kids is that kids that are in each of those buckets had a lot of credits or some credits that didn't actually help them get to graduation. So they had a lot of courses that were kind of filling their schedule and therefore were not putting them in position to graduate. Case in point, with Success Academy coming back to the high school, there are a number of kids over there that have 17, 18, 19 credits, but have 4 or 5 or 6 credits that actually count towards graduation, and they, as seniors, they think they're graduating. And so we're realizing this kind of longitudinal challenge that we're faced with coming to a head here in the senior year of some of our kids. The silver lining to this is a conversation we're having now in September versus last year when we had it in February. But then 2, we start to look at our junior class, our sophomore class, and our freshman class. Last year alone, we in 9th grade, we had 199 kids that did not pass. And that's a red flag to me because what interventions we have in place for 199 kids to make sure that they were in position to be successful and elevate to 10th grade with enough credits.
How many kids are in 9th grade?
This year?
You said 199.
199 last year that did not pass. Our 9th grade class, is it on here? 9th grade class is listed here at 656 kids enrolled. Attending right now, we have about 576. So we realize, we have a kind of a systemic challenge ahead of us to figure out this problem. Long story short, we do have and will have a more comprehensive plan of attack again in December. I would like to share that with you on how we're going to approach this. But we realize this is a longitudinal challenge we're going to have to face over multiple years.
So I guess I just want to get a sense of, again, this is speaking just from my own ignorance. I mean, how is it possible? I mean, I know how it's possible, but so are these students and families sort of creating their own schedules, or were there adults like counselors or teachers who were doing the scheduling without thinking comprehensively about core classes that are needed versus just classes to fill a schedule? I mean, how does that happen?
Yeah, historically, I can't speak to it. I think there's a few things that I've been able to see, so please know this is just coming from a year in and understanding a year in of how schedules were potentially created and how we've gotten to this spot. I think part of it is, as I mentioned earlier, we have a number of our kids that are coming to high school that are quite prepared for high school and then put into core classes and aren't given the scaffolds to be successful in those classes. They take the EOC, the end of course exam, or the OGT at the time, and they're not ready for those assessments. They fail on, and we know we have to take them again, so they're failing the course. Double that with, last year we were at 38.8% of our kids chronically absent. In years past, that number has been just as high. So our kids aren't coming to school either, high school being the biggest challenge with getting our kids to come to school every single day. And I think the third component is there have been times where out of necessity we put kids in classes versus actually purposefully putting kids in classes. And so, you know, kind of, I hate to say it, but stuffing kids into rooms to make sure that they had a schedule. Not really thinking through the trajectory of a young person and the courses they need to be successful. The one conversation I know we've had with the high school leadership team, especially going into the 2019-2020 school year, as we move to a full academy model, is to begin to figure out how to front load those core classes in 9th and 10th grade to ensure that our kids have as many of that as possible to be successful in those core classes, and pass them and get the supports necessary so that 11th and 12th they can have more of the electives. I think in the past it might have been inverted in some way, and our kids haven't been given the coursework necessary.
Wow. Thank you so much for that explanation. Yeah, I guess this is just just communicating to a community where you think about a district that has been sort of in distress, and you see these types of statistics and realities around the practice and the procedures in which we either don't have in place or they're intentionally in place that are sort of railroading students. And, you know, we didn't get here overnight. And that's one of the things that I tried to preface when I speak publicly about sort of what's happening in Lorain City schools and in urban districts across the state, right? There's been a lot of neglect in terms of, as adults, as a community, we've neglected our responsibility to hold our districts accountable. And so I do want to thank Mr. Hardy and this administration for bringing these things to light. I think it's so easy to talk about what we do well and sort of dismiss what we aren't doing well. And I think when you have a clear understanding of the issues, only then can you go in and truly operate. And again, these things didn't happen overnight, and so there's no expectation for us to think that the issues will be resolved overnight. But there is one thing that, on the record, I will say, is that now we have procedures and structures in place. So now that we can actually test and evaluate what we're doing, as opposed to just talking about what we think should be done. What we do know about these communities and districts and urban education is that there is no silver bullet. But if there is no strategy in place, we will never, ever pull our districts into a place where our students are getting access to quality education and access to really sort of quality opportunities around their career and long-term education. So again, I just want to thank Mr. Hardy and the administration for putting these things on the record. A lot of people don't like talking about their faults and flaws, and so I commend you all for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. The last piece that I want to mention is I won't say the other half of academics, but I think it's an equal component as we think about our academic approach. It is the way that we reach and build relationships with our kids. Last year, we alluded to, at the end of last year, we alluded to some of our data points we received from a survey called Youth Truth that outlined a lot of the things that our kids were saying. We had over 3,000 of our kids kind of speak to the challenges they were facing as young people, not academically necessarily, but just as young people within the school system. And some of the big messages we heard pretty loud and clear from our kids was that they wanted to be cared for, that they wanted an adult to speak to, and they wanted to know that they were worth more than just a paycheck, to be honest. There are multiple kids that have said to me multiple times that they wonder if the adults, and that's throughout the system, that's not just teachers, that's not just principals, that's any adult that has been near them, they were wondering if they really cared. And so that sent a message to us that we have to think differently about the well-being of our kids and how we approach them and how we make them better people along the way. I shared some statistics at Town Hall around our suspension numbers that had publicly been called in question. I was receiving a number of emails and questions around, what's going on with suspensions, what's going on with the high school, what is all the challenges that we're facing. And so it was really a reflective practice to actually go back 3 years and look at suspensions over time. And some of the numbers that we saw there were pretty alarming at the rates in which kids were suspended. which in itself necessarily may not be a terrible thing without actually seeing what did you do in response when kids came back? What did you do to actually make them better people? But what we found is a lot of times that our kids were suspended on, over and over and over again with no restorative practice put in place to remediate the issue, but also make the young person better, right? So it's one thing to get in trouble, but it's another thing to help you not get in trouble again. And so this year we've moved to a restorative practice approach to have more dialogue and create more spaces for dialogue and conversation with our young people. And you'll see, and I believe it's in the yellow folder, I think I took it out of the yellow folder, is it the restorative approach? It's a one-pager, it's on the left-hand side. It's, Stephen might be on the left-hand side of your folder, I apologize. And you'll see the restorative approach kind of outlined there that speaks to the importance of helping our young people be a part of their own investigation of what they did wrong and how they can do it better or improve upon the actions that they've taken. And they, nationally research-based organizations have looked at this for a long time and have seen the results of a restorative approach is to reduces the amount of crime and violent acts that are in a school. At the same time, we also realize that takes time as well to build up that muscle for a system that historically may not holistically. Again, there's great teachers like, the Mr. Coffins of the world who meet and talk with their kids regularly. That wasn't something that was approached with all leaders and teachers in every single building. So this approach is forcing us to have those conversations with kids in a way that is uplifting and allows for deeper dialogue about who we are, what we need to do to get better. So with that said, the question came about, do we continue or have we suspended kids if they make bad choices? And the answer is absolutely yes. We don't condone, by any stretch of the imagination, behavior that is detrimental to the well-being of all by any stretch. Specifically at a high school where you have about 2,000, 2,100 kids, you can't afford to allow kids to make bad choices that puts other kids in harm's way. And so we deal with those very, very seriously. At the same time, I will say that is a small subset of kids that we have to deal with very heavy-hand policies, while the rest of our kids, we're rebuilding the way we think about becoming better people. Because as we think about us as adults, we often do not solve our problems with our hands physically, right? We might, write it on paper, have conversations. If we have an argument, we dialogue, and we're trying to teach our kids the same skills starting in pre-K. So that restorative approach is something we're building while also upholding the expectations for all of our kids, and those severe behaviors we do still deal with appropriately as needed. And that's the last piece for the instructional side of things. Mr. Kaufman.
Yeah, I would just like to say, as a staff member at the high school and some of my colleagues, now for me personally, the school year, I have not seen some of the issues that other staff members have seen, but I know there is a concern in regards to the safety issue at the high school. That's something that has been told to me by many staff members. And I think in some cases, I am not opposed to restorative practice. I think, as you mentioned, it's very important to have dialogue with students and that understanding. At the same time, I think there also, and it sounds like you're alluding to, there are specific behaviors that will not be tolerated. There are blacks and whites in terms of, if you do this, this is going to be the consequence. Because my fear has always been, and one of the things as a parent of a child that graduated from Lorain City Schools, as a person that's worked here for 27 years, I don't want us to lose the kids that want to come to school because they're afraid of those that may impact their education. And we've always had to fight that battle in many circles, whether we go into the public, as all of us do, when people ask us questions, and we have to respond to those questions sometimes in an uncomfortable situation. So I would just hope that the administration, and I know you have alluded to with your previous comments, that we do make sure that we take care of those things, because I don't want to see any types of criminal elements exist in our schools that are going to impact our teachers, our students, our community. And kids that say, I don't want to come to school anymore because I'm afraid to go to school. To me, that's one of the worst things that we could ever have as a school district. For a child at any level to say, I don't want to come to school because I'm afraid what might happen, or a teacher to say I'm afraid to walk the hallways because something might happen. So
I think you raise a very valid point, and I think that has become the narrative for whatever reason, and some of it legitimate concerns, for sure, absolutely. You know, when we think about a high school and think about the challenges that sometimes are surround us in our community, that sometimes then bleed into our school, we have to address them swiftly. For the record, up until, again, I haven't spoken to Mr. Garvey today, there had been 12 incidents of what we would say aggressive or physical altercations that have been accounted for at the high school. 12. The unfortunate situation is where I met with a security guard. I was walking through the hallways today, and he was half joking, but also somewhat serious about the fact that he can't wear his security shirt in the grocery store because people approach him and ask him about the 137 fights that have been at Lorain High. And when he hears that, he instantly jumps to the defensive because he's like, I'm there every day. There aren't 137 fights at my high school. Do we have our challenges? Absolutely. But the narrative and the unfortunate rumor mill that runs around the city, around the behaviors at Lorain High, precede actually what goes on there. I would, I'm partially biased because I'm there and I see it, and obviously not as deeply as you see it every single day, Mr. Coughlin, but there's a lot of joy and love in that building that people just miss. There's those moments where, our kids are, they want to be there. They want to come to school. A young person was walking 30, 40 minutes to school from Erie Ave and said, I want to get here earlier, so we got him a bike. Those type of things, those happen every single day, but no one tells that story. And so what precedes the reality is what people believe to be true about our schools, which we just have to figure out how to navigate
or
as
the
well.
kids that are open enrolled that come into the CCP program or the early Titan College, because it's an amazing program,
Right.
that come from other districts, and I'm not going to mention those districts to throw them under the bus, but people would be surprised if you heard those names, but they want to come to Lorain High School because we have such a good program.
Absolutely.
In the Titan Early College program, which...
Absolutely. And those are the stories. I won't even say stories. That's the reality that, is 95% of our daily engagement, and that 5% or maybe even less dominates our headlines and our conversation. And once we're able to flip that for people to see the reality that happens in CCP, that happens with our kids every single day, they'll realize Lorain is a great place to be.
Now, you mentioned, if I don't mind me kind of piggybacking on that, in the town hall, I believe you mentioned the fact that students have left. Did you, and maybe I missed when I watched it, but has the high school lost 350 students, and you said something about the average of the elementaries, 20 students per, did I hear you correctly?
Yeah, so we had, we were looking at enrollment numbers, so that was separate from the anything related to incidents at
Right,
school.
right. I was just curious, those students that have left, is there something in terms of why? Did we, as a district, did our administrations call the parents? Why did you leave?
Right.
Why are you not staying? And evaluating those situations.
Yeah, I think in the reality of most of those situations, they actually never showed up this year.
Okay.
So there were parents that registered their kids in June and July for the upcoming year, and they just actually never showed up.
Okay.
I think the last number I saw, 15 days in, we had 150 kids who just have never spent one day here in Lorain City Schools for whatever reason. They might have moved, they might have, gone to a different district, whatever it might have been, but they were registered in the summer. So we're working actually through a lot of those numbers. And what's interesting to just, to Mr. Richardson's point around some of the things we've seen through this administration, my fear is that has been a trend over time where there has been an inflated enrollment number, but the actual number of kids that have, been to school and that we followed up to see where they were just never happened to the degree that it needs to your point. So I actually think we're uncovering some things about the past 2 or 3 years that has maybe brought us to this point to realize we need to do something different as we look at attendance and enrollment. I know Ms. Prass and her team, in coordination with our Chief Operations Officer, Mr. Hawks, have worked very closely together to identify new leadership and support of that effort. So Mr. Montague will be spending a lot more time with some of our kids we love the most, who have some of the largest challenges of getting to school, and like that is just his role. We have our safety compliance officers who fall under Mr. Karuski, who are driving and looking at all of our kids, not only making phone calls, but making home visits on a daily basis. They meet with him every Friday. Every Friday they meet with Mr. Karuski to go through those numbers. So I think we're going to clean up a lot of the things that have been kind of an epidemic for some time. Some other smaller glitches that I know that I spoke to Ms. Haney about on the early college side, that some of our attendance reconciliation has been off. So we found just last week alone, I was like, why are these numbers so far off? There were 83 kids at Illyria's early college that they take attendance for, but they weren't recorded in our attendance. And I'm thinking, wow, we caught that now, but how long has that been happening as well? So those type of glitches we're working through, but I think you're illuminating like where are our kids and why are they not there?
And two things, I want to step away and try to look at sort of the bigger issue around restorative approach, restorative practices, and are we really talking about sort of non-violent, sort of minor infractions that students are having that traditionally, for example, I know, and this is all online, I think 2016, 2017, Lorain ranked number 10. I think we had a 38.6% suspension rate per 100 students. So there was a culture of suspending kids, right? And again, this is data that could be found on cleveland.com. It's also the Department of Education. And I know statewide, I think in pre-K, there were like 36,000 suspensions throughout the state of Ohio, right? Mostly black and brown kids for disruptive behavior or being disobedient, right? And we know, I mean, that's a wide sort of span of infractions in terms of what constitutes being disobedient. So when we talk about it, we hear about all the fights in Lorain High School. That's a bit different than some of the minor infractions that we've seen students be sort of kicked out of school for, especially younger kids, and the role that plays on sort of their learning opportunities because they're outside the classroom. So can you speak a little bit about in-school versus out-of-school suspension, and what are we doing at the lower school level so that we're not kicking kids out of class for just being a kid in some cases?
Yeah, so, and there's a healthy balance there too. So almost like on the instructional side, we were speaking to this a little bit, I think there's a healthy balance on the school culture side, right? So to be clear, there's still very egregious, things that are happening in elementary to middle and high school that we need to address with consequence, while at the same time, the approach that we're taking is to address some of these things before they become bigger issues, proactively addressing school culture in a way that is effective. But Ms. Price, if you could just speak to those questions that Mr. Richardson asked a little bit about, what are we doing for those more minor offenses? How are we keeping them, and hopefully, keeping them as small as possible? But what is our approach to ensure that our kids are learning from the mistakes and becoming better?
Absolutely. Great question. I think, one, behaviors are addressed. All behaviors are addressed. Minor behaviors, major behaviors. The idea of restorative practice is that we are building one proactive relationship with our kids. And so we are making sure that kids understand, scholars understand that there is an adult who cares about them, and really building a sense of community, not only in our classrooms, but in our school community. So to the question around, will my pre-K scholar or my kindergartner be suspended for, as Dr. Brown says, being naughty, right? I think there are different levels that we need to consider. The minor misbehavior and the egregious behaviors. I've asked all leaders before suspending any scholar for greater than 3 days that they pick up the phone and they call me, right? They call me because, to your point about disruptive behaviors, I think we really need to understand what does that mean. And through the lens of restorative practice, using different learning opportunities for scholars to, one, acknowledge their behavior, but also be part of the decision-making process as to how do I respond to this, like what should happen now that I've potentially harmed my community is critically important. And so to the idea around, if I may be very candid, an adult feeling that my feelings were hurt and potentially wanting to suspend scholars for 10 days, I think we are revisiting those conversations, and I'm really grateful that we have leadership in place at the building level to be the torch bearer and saying like, let's think about this, right? What can we do to ensure that, one, this scholar continues to get an education, but also has a learning opportunity from potentially being naughty or making a poor choice. I will also say, however, that egregious behaviors are egregious behaviors, and the safety of our school community, adults, scholars, everyone is critically important. So.
And I agree with that wholeheartedly, but I also think that we also need to be mindful of the young person that may have made a sort of an egregious sort of behavior, right? And sometimes those behaviors can be one time, and I'm not saying you remove them from school, but sort of how do we give them the support so that we're not dumping them in the school to prison pipeline, and that we're using our community resources so that that person, because this is a small community, and these kids are so connected, these neighborhoods are so connected, they know each other. And so when this kid's kicked out of school, some of y'all leave this community and don't live here, but for us who live here, we still have to deal with this person as a community member, right? And so I'm not saying that the school has to be all things to all people, but what are the proper sort of handoffs or connections that we can assure that this person can be rehabilitated, for lack of a better word, and then brought back into a community. It may not be Lorain City School, but into our community where this person is supported.
And so partnering with many of our community organizations, one, ensuring that we have allowing kids the opportunity, it's just someone to talk to, right? If that's someone who is in the school building or someone, a resource that is outside of the school building to talk about behavior and how it potentially impacts the community. And that is at all grade levels. I know the high school is fortunate to have just a couple of social workers. And so also looking at our middle schools, like how can guidance counselors and also just adults in general be potentially used inside of the school building. If needed, we are and we have reached out to outside organizations that we partner with to say like, this scholar may need some additional support. How can we make sure that it happens?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pratt. I just to really put a pin to this conversation and to circle around this challenge, right? Because there's many people that are involved in the well-being of our young people, and those are mostly adults in our schools. So the care for our adults is equally as important to us to make sure that they are able to support our kids, especially in those times of need, while also not compromising their well-being. So it's a very, very tricky space to be in. However, I will say this, that all of that really is fixed and addressed through conversation and dialogue and relationship building. Ms. Prass shared with me one day that she was just asking kids, do you have an adult that you can talk to, like an adult in the school building you can talk to about your problems? And they said no one. Like, there's no one they could talk to. So that is just a signal to me, one signal of like, how do we help build those relationships that are so necessary? Because we know that a child will be successful if they have that one adult in the building that cares for them. And so how do we build that mindset and move to this space of the well-being of the community without compromising the well-being of the individual?
That's incredibly sad if that is the case. And some of my colleagues, and I'm not going to mention names, but recently one of our students became homeless and collected necessities for the student, purchased food for the student, and it's those kind of things that makes me proud to be an educator in Lorain, and seeing, and I'm sure it happens across the district, but stepping up when they see a student and at first the student's like, I don't really want that, but then they realize they need that, and they need that help, or even with getting the laptops, helping them get their laptop because there was not a parent to go and get their laptop for them. So those kind of things. And you mentioned the social workers. We have, Ms. Neely and Jackson do a great job with our students at the high school. They're top-notch people.
And now the challenge is, how do we build more of that, right? And I think we have great seeds planted, great individuals that, again, that was a small subset of kids that Ms. Pratt spoke to, so I don't think that's indicative of all of our kids. There's a lot of kids that mention so many people in this room's name. The challenge is now, how do we make sure that all of our kids have that, right? And so I think you're right. There's great stories like that we build off of and build the momentum necessary. If I may, can I move to operational? Yep. And operational is a lot more brief because most of it was around the financial improvement. So that's just this top page of the leaderboard. It's just that top financial outlook. So in short, we just wanted to make sure it was clear, how we were allocating funds. The question has still, even to the last town hall, been brought up around how are we, financing all of these additional deans, and how are we supporting all of these initiatives, and without spending more than we currently have. And this page is to articulate a little bit of that. So for those that don't have it in front of you, it's a short chart that gives you fiscal year 2016, 2017, and the current fiscal year, this current past fiscal year, 2018. So you look at these past 3 years, and you'll see exactly what we allocated our funds for on the salary side. We drilled down a little bit deeper in the administrative salaries because that's often what comes into question. And then we outlined benefits, purchase services and supplies, and materials. Those are pretty much the bulk of everything we spend our money on. The two largest buckets of money are allocated to our salaries and then to our purchase services. So I will speak specifically to those two pieces. As far as salaries go from FY fiscal year 2017 versus FY or fiscal year 2018, you will see that our salaries increased by 3.54% between 2017 and 2018. But if you look at the difference between 2016 and 2017, we were moving at a 5.17 increase number. We were increasing by 5.17%. Now that's to indicate, how much more we were spending. And Josh, if he was here, he unfortunately is at another meeting, he would indicate that that is about average or just slightly above average of the amount you spend or grow to spend over time because of the rise in benefit cost and the 2.5% that's added on to salaries, things of that nature. But what you see from 17 to 18 is actually a decrease in that number. And the reason why there's a decrease in that number is we realized that we had to become a little bit tighter with the money and how we were spending it. We realized that we could not grow at that continued rate of over 5%. And the fact that we're growing at 3.54% is significant because of where we see our outlook being, 3, 4, 5 years from now. So I want to articulate that we're growing, but not at the rate, anywhere near the rate that we had been projected in years past. And some may think, well, that's only a 1.5% decrease in the rate in which you're growing. But when you're talking millions of dollars, 1.5% is significant over time. So we're very proud to see that we're able to make that reduction in cost. As far as the administrative salaries, which also has come into question, what I attempted to do here for you, Commission, is to just outline those positions that were Title I teacher level or higher, because the question often becomes just like, where are all these positions and how are you spending all this money? So if you look at fiscal year 2017, I've outlined all of the positions that were of those positions or higher. And in 2017, there were 77 positions that included the Title I teachers or higher. This year, we have 71 positions that are Title I teacher level or higher. Again, the position Title I teacher has been shifted to another bucket, but nonetheless, there's been a reduction of 6 positions that were, again, above that pay grade. Therefore, if you look at the administrative salaries alone, in FY17, it was about $7.69 million, and then in FY18, it's $6.92 million. So a pretty significant savings, about a 10% decrease in administrative salary cost that we've had, which equivocates to a little over about $800,000 less than we have in the past. Benefits, again, some of the rise in benefit costs are, again, just more expensive as we look at just insurance and those things that have come up. We're seeing an increase. We also realized our shift away from the health trust and now into the consortium that we're in will create savings over time, but the initial investment is a little bit higher. You will also see that purchase services went up slightly, about $250,000. We spent a little bit more on school supply, and purchase services for our schools. However, the rate in which we increased was significantly lower than in years past. In FY 16 to 17, we increased by 9.2%, but from 17 to 18, which is last year to this year, we've only increased by 0.62%, which is a significant decrease. But in short, I wanted to outline this trend for you to show the smaller ways we're creating the savings. Again, being smart with our positions, our higher level positions, and how we're hiring for them, and kind of becoming more lean. We also realized that we also cut out some of the auxiliary meetings that we held at our school sites that were costing us significant amount of money. So we have what we call our building level leadership team, our BLT teams that were, kind of meeting after school. We built that in the school day so we don't have to pay for that meeting. We had our PBIS meetings, and we had our RTI meetings, response to intervention meetings that were held, and again, people were given stipends of upwards of $1,500 a year to participate on those committees. Now, when you add that all up, it costs the district about $264,000 a year to have those meetings with those teachers. But instead, we've built that time and building that time during the school day so that teams will have time during those early release days, once we start to get things going, to have some of those conversations and rethinking those structures so we can create that savings on top of the additional savings we're making. In part because we also realize that 3 or 4 years from now, the numbers that look very nice in black will put us in the red if we don't start to find different ways to save. So that's the direction we've been going.
I had a question about, I know during the transition of doing sort of the reorg at the building level, there were some building leaders who former building leaders who weren't didn't make the cut, so to speak, and weren't necessarily building leaders anymore. Can you give us an overview of how many of those people are still in the district and what roles are they currently in?
Yep.
No, not specific names, just numbers.
Sure. So we had, I want to say 6 or 7, I want to give you the wrong number, 6 or 7 former school leaders who were not accepted into the role as a school leader, that were former principals, assistant principals, or other. A number of them, 3 or 4 of them actually left the district and took a job somewhere else. We had another 3 or 4 that are actually still in the district as teachers because they had tenure. And so all of those teachers are now placed in a classroom teaching, and matter of fact, I think all of them are on the elementary side, are teaching in an elementary building, and have a classroom of kids, and moved from LAA to LEA.
Are they permanent teachers or substitute teachers?
They are permanent teachers now. There was one teacher, again, one former administrator who we didn't have a licensure that matched his certification at the beginning of the year. So he was situated in another building supporting a number of different classrooms. But once opening opened up, he has slotted into a classroom. Any other questions around operational piece?
I know another operational piece that has come up has been sort of the stadium, and sort of there's a few nuisances on the field, one being the concession stand at the north end of the field, and then there's also been issues with the track. I know over the years, for many years, there's been talks about creating some type of endowment or putting away some type of operational money that would support sort of the maintenance of that structure. Can you speak to that? Have there been any talk about that? Or?
Sure, and I want to bring Mr. Hawks up just for a brief second, just to speak a little bit about what we've been talking about lately. If Mr. Hawks, you want to speak just very briefly, because again, there's not a ton there yet, but there have been some inklings of conversations to support this effort.
Yes, actually, as we talking within the last couple of weeks, the Booster Club is looking at donating their time and the costs to redo the roof of the concession stands that you speak about. That is one area that we would like to bring back, the one on the north side, where we could put a fence and divide that way both sides of the guest side and the home side can use that concession stand. It's been a long time. We've been patching the track as we can use it, but that is another area, as well as refurbishing the locker rooms for our guests and for the officials. So yeah, those are our top priorities that we are looking into, and we're hoping to use. And the Browns, like Mr. Carney had said, use their name and support if we could just raise some other companies or other individuals that would like to help us in that area.
And Mr. Hawks, can you also give an update on the the former Southview High School building? I drive by and I see part of it still standing, part of it is gone. Is there a timeline in terms of finishing the demolition? And then two, what are we doing to sort of abate nuisances? So this idea of attractive nuisances where kids from the area may come onto the grounds, so that there's no liability on our end as a district.
At this point, the contractors in Hammond Construction are responsible for those areas. We are probably a week out in finishing the abatement end of it, the asbestos abatement. But as you can see now, in the areas that they have finished, we're starting to do some demo work on that now. So we're hoping within the next couple of weeks you will see quite a bit of movement in the demo of that the facilities. After that, we're going to create a large green space at this time, and then in the future we'll have to sit down, with Mr. Hardy and decide exactly what we would like to do with all that property.
Thank you.
Is there any consideration to the press box?
I was waiting for that one.
That press box is a little old.
Yes, we have looked into that also.
Thank you.
I also think, though, the voice of the Titans does such a great job. Who needs a new press box? But
So it's like comfortable there, right?
No comment.
Thank you.
And with that said, I just have one unrelated announcement to operational pieces, but I think it's another point of pride to speak about, just how far I think our community has really come, and celebrating just a positive piece. So we had a chance to speak with the city, the citizens of Lorain over the past few months, and under the leadership of Mr. Hawks and a few other individuals. There had been a lot of conversation around years past where I believe there was some type of bonfire that occurred within the district, and there was a lot of discussion around it going away. And ironically, it was something that I was told I took it away, and I said, "What is it?" I didn't even know I took it away. But long story short, we had great conversations with leadership there, and talked a lot about what we could do differently to continue that tradition and pride. And we've landed on having a homecoming parade be a part of our celebration on October 5th. So again, the dance is there, the football game's there, but we're also going to have a parade in which we celebrate our kids and have a chance for our band and for a lot of members of our school community to be a part of this day and parade through our city a bit and end with like a festival at the stadium and just make it a joyous event and just show our pride in a way that I think we should honor and continue to honor and build that tradition, build on that tradition. So I say all that to say all the hard work that goes into everything that everyone that's in this room that works for us and this direction pays off when we have events like October 5th that are coming. There's a lot of joy this past Friday with the dedication of the field, and I think we'll feel that again on October 5th. And I hope that feeling that we feel on our athletic fields and through celebrations will slowly become part of our everyday practice and feeling in each and every building. And the narrative that is around our district changes to the positive one that a lot of us have been speaking to tonight.
And then the last question I have on the operational side is, so I've heard several things in the community about the levy, and there's sort of I've heard two things. One, that the school board has decided to not put a levy on, and then I've heard that they're going to put a levy on and let the people of Lorain decide if they want to support the school district or not. Have you heard, have you had any updates from the school board about the levy? Has there been any sort of invitation to have a discussion about the district's operations?
No, I haven't received any communication around any of that. Every once in a while I'll get a public records request from the board, but nothing specific to the levy. And no, invitation to kind of speak about it in any meaningful way. We do often receive, I believe, on the agenda for board meetings, it says something about an update from the CEO, like put on the board agenda. However, it's never been, it was just always on the agenda versus it being something that's said to me. But nonetheless, to answer your question, no, there hasn't been any further discussions around that.
Could I make a recommendation? Josh isn't here tonight, obviously. He's at the board meeting, correct?
Correct. Yep.
And this is not a blame of anybody, but I would encourage or like when our meetings are that we are not conflicting with theirs, or whoever communicates between the two bodies, that we do not meet at the same time that the board does, because I don't like for people in the community to have to decide where they want to go or who they want to watch. I just think that would be a courtesy to the community, and just, and on both sides. I'm not saying it's
absolutely.
Whoever puts the schedule. I don't know if that's...
So on the record, I just want to go out and say that our meetings were planned at our retreat last September at Lorain County Community College. We had a retreat, and we looked at our calendars, and we gave a sort of projected a year and scheduled our meetings a year out. So in December, we'll do that again, but these meetings were planned last September. So again, I just want that to be on the record, because the dates were already sort of, again.
Because does the board meet on a specific, don't they meet on a specific Monday every month? I believe I'm
not sure, because there was one last Monday and there was one this Monday.
Okay. The first and the third Monday, they meet on the same time as City Council. And that was one of the issues that sort of predates this body, was that we were hoping, when I was on City Council, that they would also meet on off days so that the community, to your point, would be able to attend both meetings and not sort of have to choose. But that decision was made through a personality, whereas this decision was done sort of we planned this out a year ago. And so again, I know that there may be a perception of us or them deciding to meet on the same dates, but that is not the case. Just as happens to be, this is a perfect example of happenstance.
I know we decided on these dates a while ago, but I'm not opposed to changing our December date so it doesn't conflict.
Absolutely. I agree.
I think it's a great idea. Thank you, Mr. Cole. And that's it from me, Mr. Chair.
At this time, we would like to take a sort of comment from the public. Can you please go to the podium, or if it's better for us to bring you the mic, we could bring you the mic and just state your name and address for the record. Thank you.
No. No, is it on?
Now it is. Okay, now you can hear me. My name is Miss Rhoda Lee. My address is 1904 West 22nd Street, Lorain, Ohio. Good evening. First of all, I would like to address and look into it. Glad to see all of you again. Is the fact that when we're talking about the meetings, I would just and brought the same question up, Mr. Calderon, in terms of us not having the same need. It's a disservice to the community. We feel that we should have the right to be able to attend both meetings, the Wayne City School Board meeting and the Stress Commission meeting. And it has not been before. Prior to getting here just now, I had to say a few words to the Wayne City School Board members. I don't know if they did, but I brought the agenda here because I'm concerned in here when you talking about reports and recommendations of the CEO personnel matters, operation matters, and reports and recommendations of the CEO and other matters. What does that mean? It's not there, but it's listed in the agenda as that these are things that would be discussed through, and here's a copy of it at this particular time. But I'm here basically and more concerned about my babies out here, my students. We talked about it and what's going on, and I have to say that we've come quite a way in terms of the CEO and the administration and the people he has in place. Our community forum meetings have been excellent. He has engaged the community. We are giving input and ideas to Dr. Hardy as to what we see and what we believe. But one of the things that I have to say, and I'm being perfectly honest, we mandate laws and behaviors for our children. What about the parental responsibilities? When does the legislature or you begin to mandate certain behaviors and patterns for the families and the parents? That parental and community accountability is very important to our children. Our babies are out there asking, who am I? Why am I here? What's going on? We have our little ones coming to school on a daily basis, traumatized by whatever situation is, be it family, environmental, whatnot. They want to know we need the resources in our buildings whereby we can have the help that our babies out here need. When you were talking, Mr. Richardson, and asking the question about the counseling and the credits, I too and the community is concerned. There should be no child who is entering into, it's called to say, the 9th grade without knowing what core credits they need, know how many credits they have, and have everything established prior to them going into high school. We need to have the resources in our elementary level for our students. They need help, we need help. We need the community resources, we need the families, and if the family is not doing what they should be doing in terms of our kids coming to school without the traumas that they have to endure daily, then we as that village must be there to care for them. And I think it's about time that we do this. Our community is tired of what's been going on with the bickering. And our feeling is now, Dr. Hardy is here. People are in here who are doing an excellent job at this point in terms of trying to turn around everything and doing the things for our kids that need to be done, to showing our babies out there that we care and we're concerned, where they no longer just have to say, who am I? Where they'll know that there's someone out there that cares. And this is where our everything, all of our energy should be focused at this point. I don't like what's happening at this point. I don't like the negativity, the petty politics that are being displayed here, and I, hopefully, good Lord, let me live to state and to let you know that there is a caring out there. We care. We're very, very happy about the progress that we're making in terms of our children and turning our district around. It's gone on too long. And we must realize the community that we live in is a multicultural. 80 to 85% of our children are multicultural. That's another, we have to deal with that. It seems that they can come together out there. We're talking about the fights. Tony, you know, it's always been fights, right?
You said it, not me.
No comment on that one. But we're going to say that we want to do the things that we have to do and engage our community again, and even more so, more now than ever, in getting them involved in what's happening in our schools, and more importantly, what's happening with our children. So, but as I said, if we could think about it, we need to have meetings of our distress commission and our board separated.
Okay.
We need to know, because we need to be involved in both.
Thank you, Ms. Lee.
Any other questions from the public? You want to go to the podium, state your name and address?
But I guess maybe I missed your response when you talked about, Mr. Hardy, when you talked about...
Excuse me, ma'am, sorry, for the record, can you state your name and address?
Yeah, Deborah Patterson, 4026 Woodworth Drive, Lorain. So I guess maybe I missed it because I really couldn't hear, you know, there were you guys were asking questions, I couldn't hear everything. But we talked about the state standards. So I have a senior that's going to graduate this year. Well, she's supposed to graduate this year. What are we doing for the seniors who are short of the state credits? Because, you know, I've heard, you know, there's a lot of things going on, a lot of things being said. But at one point I was told that we had 300 seniors and only 300 seniors for this year. But only 1/3 of those seniors are able to graduate if they were to graduate right now. A lot of them are missing the state credits or the state testing that they need. So my question is, what are we doing to help those other 200 kids that should graduate? The issue that one of the concerns that I did have was I have a niece who's in another district. Back in June, when school ended for them in this other district, her mother received a letter, an email, and a phone call saying your daughter is short state credits. We have dates set aside for you to bring your daughter in to get prepped for the class. And then in June, actually in the second or third week of July, she was able to go in and take that test, whatever test she needed. Now I know Lorain City Schools had something like that, but the problem was a lot of the parents, so those 200 parents, didn't know that that was offered here at Lorain. What are we going to do for those seniors this year, and what are we going to do for the seniors next year to make sure that we're not waiting until December of this year to try to get those kids to pass those tests? Because my understanding is that in December, our seniors only have one shot to take that test, whereas the other class, underclassmen, they have December and April to make up those tests so they can graduate. So what are we going to do to help those seniors for 2019, that's supposed to graduate May 20 of 2019.
Thank you, Ms. Patterson, for the question. There are a few pieces, and I alluded to a meeting that we had a couple of weeks ago to initiate this conversation. So again, about half of our senior class is in really good shape, and we have limited concerns about the other half. To what you're speaking to, we have some concerns, and some within that half we have an additional set of concerns. Part of that meeting was specifically thinking about and thinking through our options. So we have a work keys option and we have credentialing options in which we're looking at for all of our kids to ensure that they're getting what they need. What we use for our credentialing process is Apex. And Apex is a computer-based system that allows our kids to kind of catch up with those credits that they're missing, but it also comes with a tutoring component of a teacher within the school building. So that conversation that it was initiated 2 weeks ago to initiate that process, identify our kids and get them into that coursework and begin getting that support and tutoring that will happen either after school or on Saturdays. We also realized, and you had another question around for future grades as well. I made this pretty plain and clear for those that were in that meeting that I don't want to come, even September was earlier than we did it last year. I don't want us to have this meeting again in September for our soon-to-be seniors, but now are currently juniors. I want us to figure out our solutions systemically for all of our classes. So that's the point of our conversation coming up this week, to kind of put a Band-Aid on what we need to do for this year to make sure that our kids are successfully across the stage, but systemically figure out that long-term solution. So it include more than just tutoring. We have to be a lot closer monitors to our kids and where they are and how they're receiving their credits, so they're receiving credits in the right course at the right time and are getting the supports they need. We have to rethink how we look at the summer, because I think a summer is a lost part of the year in which we could do so much more to support our kids, especially our rising seniors, to get them successful for their senior year. And I think a third piece is, as we start to think about the curriculum as we develop it from 9th through 12th grade, how do we build out the scope and sequence of courses so that our kids are getting what they need earlier, so we're not hitting that panic button in 11th grade or 12th grade. So hopefully that you heard a little bit of the short term and the long term as well.
And then just another question, you know, I mean, I'm sure we all heard and we've read and we're all kind of tired of the negative press that goes along with Lorain. I'm a longtime Lorain resident, and when someone's talking negative about Lorain to me, I take it personal. I feel like you're saying that it's me. So my question to you guys as the commission and CEO, and even if the school board was here, why can't you guys just get in the room, lock yourself up in the room, and figure out what the issue is so we can work together as one, instead of hearing this from the board, this from the CEO, this from the commission, because it's just embarrassing. You know, we tell our kids, you know, to act like adults, but it's almost like we as the board and commission and CEO, and I'm not trying to pick on you guys, but it just seems like when you're reading it, and you know, you can block out the newspaper if you want, but then all of a sudden when you're turning on the TV and you got 19 Action News, you got Channel 5 News, and we're just hearing all this negative things about Lorain, it's sad. You know, for the first time last week I was telling on someone that I actually so on my vehicle I'm Titan Pride. I have the bumper sticker, I have the license plate tag, I want to take it off. You know, honestly, because it's just like the negative, but I can't do it because there's so many kids in this district that are not my babies, but they are my babies. So, I mean, there's a kid that can walk up to me right now and say, Mrs. Patterson, I need $5 and I'm going to give it to him. But the problem is that, you know, this negativity that we keep hearing is just sad. So if I had a request, I would just say for you guys to get up in the room, lock the door, we'll slide your pizza in if you need to, we'll slide your drinks, but work it out. Let's just work it out. Let's find a common ground. And I understand that the board has no power, and I'm not blaming anyone, but it's sad that, like I said, we want our kids to be adults, but the adults aren't acting like adults. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, so I want to intervene, and I really respect those comments, and thank you for your insight. Several things. So one, I think that the media also sort of should have some accountability and be responsible for communicating stories, right? And two, for the record, I actually meet with school board members for breakfast, for lunch. They call me, they text me, right? So the narrative that we're not acting like adults is a false one. One. Two, we just invited one of the school board members to meet with us to hash out, just to do exactly what you said, and it was no, right? And so we can meet, but I mean, there has to be a meeting takes multiple parties. And to be perfectly honest, I've met with all the school board. In fact, the school board president, since I became the chair of the commission, has had breakfast 6 times, right? I've met with Mr. Ballard. I've met with, I talked to Mr. Sturgill. Mr. Ballard and I just had a 3-hour lunch, breakfast that turned into a lunch at IHOP. So, I mean, the media doesn't know that. The community, it doesn't talk about that, because I'm the type of person that, let's have a discussion, let's talk, let's be adults, let's work through our issues, right? And then at some point publicly, because we are a joint body, there may be some issues around sort of public records and issues around sort of public meetings. But we're not opposed to having that meeting, right? But it takes two. And I'm not pointing the finger, because there has been some mistakes on the commission side in terms of, or what be perceived to be mistakes by the state or the commission. And so I'm not saying we're innocent in this, but I will go on the record and say that I have met with the school board members. I have text messages from the school board members, and I've sat down with Mr. Hardy and tried to broker conversations with school board members. So just because it's not in the paper doesn't mean it's not happening, and it's just because you're reading it in the paper don't mean that's the whole truth. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Hardy for his.
Mr. President, I really do appreciate it. I appreciate your insight. I see your young ladies at the high school, and I see the joy that they bring as being proud Titans, very proud Titans, scholar athletes. And I know your husband and all the great things he has done for the community as well, and realize the place and understand and have empathy for the place that you actually sit in. Because if I were reading that too, I would feel the exact same way.
And I don't believe everything that I'm reading in the paper, trust me. I'm not naive.
Yeah.
But it's just,
No.
it's just saying.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we need to know, but I don't mean to cut you off, but we need to know that you guys are having that communication, because we don't know that all we see is the negative.
Well, they're not going to report that. So if I,
Right. So that's actually your job.
right. So in the medium, in terms of this space, I mean, this is the public forum where we can have that discussion. But in terms of going to the media, I just personally, in terms of my style, don't think that the media is where we have these discussions, right? I think that the media plays a role in communicating discussions, but at the same time, everything that's done and said doesn't have to be done in public. Not because they're trying to hide things, it's because there has been some sort of hurt feelings, right? And so to get to that place of where we could have just to meet and just talk and hash things out and hear other people's perspectives. A lot of times when we come and we talk to Mr. Hardy about agenda items, every agenda item that I give him, and I ask the other commissions if they have agenda items, are driven by my conversations with school board members or from what I hear in the community, right? So when I come up here, these are not like softball questions. These are, and this is, so I thank you all for wanting to answer these questions. These are coming from people that are meeting at the high school right now. So again, I just want to put that out there that we can't, and this is not to you, Ms. Patterson, this is just in general, is that we are working really hard to bring the school board along and to be sort of a community of leaders so that our students that are looking at us, who are reading the papers or neighboring districts, so that they can see, you know what, yes, things may have not been sort of what certain people wanted it to be, but that doesn't mean we can't work to get things we want it to be. And that's a process that, as a chair of this commission, I've taken ownership of, right? And I think we're going to get there, but it's going to take some time, and I really believe that.
Hopeful, right? I mean, we have to remain hopeful. I think my challenge is very similar to what Mr. Richardson is articulating. One, there's been multiple attempts to kind of broker that conversation, and I think that conversation starts away from the cameras and everything else, because you know, there's no intent by this commission, and I don't want to speak for the commission, but the idea for me, I don't want this to become a spectacle. I don't think that is our purpose as a body, is to create a spectacle. It's to support the educational improvement of our district. But those conversations behind the scenes to build that relationship, I think, are important. The challenge for me personally, and this is strictly to me, when I hear about things that are said personally about myself or other people, it's very hard for me to then kind of walk up to that person and say, do you want to have a conversation? I think it's very hard when you're called all types of names to then say, let's figure this out. And then you also notice too, if you, like, you know, given that you read the paper and you saw Channel 19, Channel 5, there was an absence of one side of that story, right? Intentionally. I am not going to stand up and kind of go back and forth with an individual or a body that is portraying a perspective that I think is unfair, and I don't want to make it an us versus them on television. I don't think that helps out either. So please know my position is much more of a, I want to do what I need to do for our kids and for this community and focus on what's important. And the politics and all the name calling and all those things are just not what I will engage in. So if you read recent articles lately, you will probably see an absence of my comment intentionally, because I choose not to participate in that. I grew up in a family that said, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. And I live by that as an adult. I understand. Yeah. Why are your kids in Lorain? And I say, why not? Tell me why they should. Why not? Why should? Yeah. Give a good reason why they should.
Well, and to your point, and I've said it a million times, this district offers an amazing education for our students. And she's my daughter. I'm proud of her. She texted me today. She passed another one of her business exams working for a multi-million-dollar company in Merrill Lynch. And she's a product of this district. She used and took advantage of the opportunities that existed, as your daughters, I'm sure, do, as many of our kids do. And anybody that slams the district oftentimes doesn't realize so many of the positive things that are going on in this district on a daily basis. Okay? And, you know, any kid that goes through this district that wants to get an education can. The thing is, what we have to do is to try to make everybody want to get that education and get everybody to that level. So
to that point, Mr. Kaufman, I heard that there was a kid in the district that scored a 36 on the ACT. Yep. No one, to that point, no one knew. No one knows about it, right? Yeah. So,
I know his name. I don't know if I'm allowed to say it or not, but
I just think that, again, to your point, there are great things happening.
Absolutely.
But if those things aren't communicated, then no one knows, right? And I do, and to be honest, I think I see Rick Perichin here. You've all done a great job of reporting the news, and so I do appreciate the Morning Journal. That's like our hometown newspaper, and you all have been very responsible. And the Chronicle, I don't know if they're here or not, but they've been good as well. So I do thank you all for covering the news in a way that is sort of impartial. So thank you. Can you state your name, please?
Nancy Cook, 1604 West 20th Street, Lorain, Ohio.
Can you speak into the mic, please, Ms. Cook? Thank you.
Sure.
You can pull it down.
I'm over. Well, anyway, I attend the school board meetings every time they have one. And like I said, you covered everything that they talk about at the school board meeting, which I get an answer for now. And I appreciate hearing that. When you were talking about the levy, I know I was at the school board meeting and they were kind of upset because they thought somebody put the levy on their agenda that had no business putting something on their agenda. But somebody volunteered and said, no, he didn't do it, I did it. So there is a little bit of hostility when you go to the board meeting and you are asking about things that are going on with the CEO. And it's not a friendly answer sometimes. So I understand and I appreciate our CEO for being an outstanding citizen, a role model that don't get in bed with that mess. I hate to say it, because the things they say, he doesn't comment on it, and I applaud you for that, for standing up the right way, because we don't need that. So you hear all that negative from them, you don't hear it from him, and I appreciate that. And thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. Any other comments from the public? Say your name and address, please. Thank you.
My name is Summer Harvey, 832 Highland Park Boulevard, Lorain. So I just want to start by saying that I have a very strong interest in this situation. I have a sophomore that attends Lorain High. I also have a third grader at Washington. And please forgive me, I'm a little ill-prepared for this meeting, but I did want to ask a few questions. This is the first time in my children's educational career that I've ever considered moving my middle daughter. And that's emotional for me because I as well, like Ms. Patterson, have been an advocate for Lorain City and Lorain City Schools since I've been involved. I am a product of Lorain City Schools, graduated in 2003 from Admiral King. I think, okay, my mind's a little boggled right now, but one thing I wanted to ask was about transparency. I'm sure this is being addressed in the other meeting because it was talked about in the last meeting that it was going to be addressed in this meeting, but okay, about the fights. I was talking to somebody before this meeting started, and one of the articles was like 16 fights in, I don't know, however many days. And to be honest with you, that number did not floor me, mainly because of the body. I mean, there's so many students, and I mean, you're gonna get that many people in a building, there's going to be issues, okay? It wasn't the fact that there were altercations, it was the fact that there was no transparency, in my opinion, because there were so many discrepancies with the numbers being reported. I think Tony DeMacchia addressed it in the last meeting where you were not there, but they were gonna talk to the police chief today about it and all that, but the numbers were so different. Like, I'm not sure how that happens, if that was just a mistake, a simple mistake, or if that was intentional. And I think that's where I start to get a little afraid with the future of our district. Is there going to be transparency? Why are there so many discrepancies? How can I, as a parent who is, now my daughter's in third grade. My thought process is if I'm gonna move her, I need to do it now, you know, while she's still young enough to adapt to a new environment, new people, new friends, rather than wait until she's in 6th grade. Things are still going terrible for Lorain, and now I have to worry about, you know, moving her then, which is so much more difficult for her as an individual. So that's why it's imperative for me to know now, you know, or not know, because obviously this is uncharted territories, but it's imperative for me to have some kind of, just to, you know, be told, yeah, it's going in this direction, everybody's on the same page. Why are there so many discrepancies? I guess you can answer that question first because I asked 10 questions, I'm sorry.
Could you speak to, when you say discrepancies, could you just give me a little more?
The numbers, assume that you watched the meetings that are, no, okay.
No, ma'am.
Well, there was a number of 0 reported from the school at the time of this meeting, which I think was like last week, which was not accurate. I can't even tell you that's not accurate because of my student coming home and telling me videos on Facebook, comments, you know, all that. So, and Mr. Demakia was very upset, which understandably so, that there was such a discrepancy. And okay, so my thing is, and I don't want to point any fingers and I don't want to sound, you know, but with the suspension rates you mentioned, are they not being suspended because they don't want the numbers high? Or is it really truly a process, a new process that's being put into place for the betterment of our children? I hate to even ask that question. Honestly, it's embarrassing to ask that question, but I'm nervous for my kid, you know?
I think, and I appreciate the question, and that's obviously not a feeling we want you to have, and definitely not something that I would want any of your kids to feel as well. So a few things just to kind of break down the discrepancy question and things that you're hearing. The report that was given last week at last Monday's meeting was in response to a request, and Mr. Hill just actually arrived in the back there. He could speak to this because he was actually at the meeting. They asked for the past week's fights, the number of fights. And I'm trying to remember, I was trying to actually look it up in my email so I can read it back to you, the exact dates and times of the occurrences that happened during that week. But I think there were days of the week in which there were 0 incidents, but there were days of the week where there were incidents. So if I'm not mistaken, it was like Tuesday and Thursday. There was 2 on one day and 3 on another. And you can come up, Josh, if you want to address it as well.
Officer Figueroa addressed it tonight at the board meeting. The discrepancy was what's happening in the building and what's happening just off the property. So, and it's not discrepancies per se. I think it's just looking at what the size or the location of the fights. Now, it could be that students are walking 2 blocks off the school property and then fighting. That number, he said that was probably closer to, I think 21 was the number that you put out there. Whereas actual fights that are happening in buildings, he agreed 100% with the 10 that was reported. And he did state that in the meeting tonight.
Who did?
Officer Figueroa.
Okay.
Again, I think it. Yeah. Well, I think that's why he had the police chief.
Right, and I think
that was the discrepancy.
I think part of it is when a parent, right, and this is where I like so much empathy for you and Ms. Patterson, who hear a number like 20 fights within a building, and that's the only number you initially hear. So you're like, wow, I don't want my child in that situation. But then when you actually find out, when you hear the facts, and when you, Officer Figueroa, who's our SRO, or just knowing what is in our system that tracks suspensions and fights, that number is not the same, you're like, so what's the discrepancy? You're like, what is really going on? So I think on behalf of just the greater Lorain community, I apologize that you were given a number that wasn't accurate. And the ways that we try to correct the record and make sure that that information is put out is a few ways. At last week's town hall, so I have a town hall every second Thursday of the month, in which, you know, anything that comes up or have questions, there have been meetings. Last meeting I didn't have to do it as much because there weren't as many questions, but I literally go into my computer, like I'll go to an email to show you what's going on. So I have no problem with providing the level of transparency that anyone needs, like to the point, like I'm trying to find the email for you now, because I think it's only fair that you understand and hear the actual truth versus, unfortunately, I think you were given a misguided number that created this question for you.
Well, and like I said, it wasn't even truly the fact that there were that many fights. Like, it didn't, you know, like, I'm leaving because it's so scary and dangerous. That wasn't really the situation.
Right.
The overall takeaway from that from me was, can I trust these people? Right. Are they being truthful? Are they trying to cover themselves? Are they, you know, that was my ultimate goal, was to find out, can I trust this board as well as the other board? Because, and I don't think that their negative attitude is something personal. I feel like their negative attitude may be coming from frustration. And even if it is personal, maybe some of it is, Mr. Richardson, but I don't believe that. I think some of those people on that board have our kids' best interests at heart just as well as you guys do. And I think it's unfair to say that the negativity comes only from personal issues and not out of frustration and sheer panic for our kids and wanting to address a situation and fix it fast.
Right. So, and to that point, I think the panic, again, there's a responsibility on the side of the district and also in terms of the school board and the Academic Distress Commission. I know that we don't speak to the media or sort of speak on behalf of the district. We have a CEO we've hired, and that's his role. But in terms of inciting or inducing panic, I do hear you and I do appreciate and empathize with that. And so I just think it's important that the messaging is one in which it's accurate, right? And that we leverage and use all of our communication pieces, whether it's social media or the traditional media, to get that narrative out there so that there aren't parents like you who are in a panic because they're hearing multiple things, right? And so I do think the onus is on the adults in this space to, before we go out and publicly speak on the issue, we have our facts, right? Both the CEO and the school board or whoever else is working within the district, as well as parents who may have kids in the district. I think it's so important that we have the information that is accurate before we communicate, because if not, it does exactly what you said.
Can also the data be skewed based on, excuse me, like, is it a fight or is it a confrontation? Like, I don't know, I'm not in the administrative side of it, but is a confrontation classified as being a fight? So are confrontations, if they add those numbers in with an actual physical fight, maybe those numbers are what she could be hearing? I don't know the answer to that question. I'm just kind of thinking that if two kids are squaring up to fight, but they don't actually fight, some perceive that as a fight.
How do we define that?
And how do we define what is a confrontation that looks like it's a fight in terms of an actual fight?
And I think, and ma'am, I forget your last name, I'm so sorry. Harvey, that should be easy for me to remember. But Ms. Harvey, I think the other piece too, where this has historically been a challenge, I think in a lot of districts that they face this challenge as well. When they think of fights, then you hear a number like 20, you think there's been 20 individual fights. That might be 20 individuals suspended for fighting, but it takes usually 2 people to fight, so actually the number of incidents are half that at least, right? So I think that might have been it as well. I do agree with Mr. Richardson, and I agree with Mr. Coffin. I think there's a feedback loop or an understanding loop of what's actually going on that needs to be clearly communicated, and I think our answer has been through our marketing and communications team is to any information, any factual piece that we need to put out there, we put up on our website. So both the letter in response to those discrepancies is on our website, in addition to what we've done in response to those things too. So if you have any questions about that, I'm more than welcome to walk you through how to get to those pieces, but that's how we communicate outwardly when we have those challenges as well.
So long story short, it was a miscommunication.
That's correct. That's correct. Yep.
And before we move on, lastly, I just want to add that, again, for the adults in the room, whether it's the media or the adults working in the district, and to the school board members, I would just ask, and because, I mean, honestly, these are sort of academic distress commissions and some of this turnaround work associated with House Bill 70 is the first case of impression in our state, right? The Youngstown model is about a year ahead of us. This is the second, and we're hearing talks of other districts. And so these things, in terms of, you have your theory in terms of statute and legislation and what it could look like, but in terms of the practice and the rollout and the sort of the day-to-day operational side of this legislation, we're seeing it manifest itself in our community now that we're a year in. And so I just want the adults to be responsible with information, because you're right, in the newspaper we see things, people are talking, and so we have to step up and say, okay, our traditional forms of communication, we need to rethink those and be more intentional as adults so that the message goes out we're not inducing panic. You're absolutely right. You have kids in this district, and we need to be responsible for that communication. So before we go out and we publish something, or we talk about something, or we post something, let's have our facts, because these are real families. These are real families. This isn't about House Bill 70. This isn't about the state of Ohio or the commission. This is about the people in our community. And we owe the people in our community that responsibility and that duty of loyalty, right? And so let's just be more mindful of that. Let's really do our homework. Let's get away from sort of sensationalized, like, just, gossip, and let's really, really do a better job as a commission, as a school board, as our media outlets, as everyone. Let's do a better job, and then put the onus on those who want information to go out and get it for yourself, right? Again, with social media, with everything going online, you can't believe everything you read. That's just the reality we're in, right? We're in this advanced world of sort of the commodification of information. Information is commodified. Every day there's a new story. When's the last time you saw like a follow-up or investigative like journalist report where you can track a story over 3 to 5 days in the media or on social media? You can't, right? So the onus is on you as an individual to do your homework and to really get a sense of what's going on before we react, right? We can't be as reactionary in this modern day. We have to sort of think through and look at sort of not what we're hearing, but the source in which it's coming from, right? And then make a decision based upon that. I'm not saying the ABC is right, the CEO is right, or the school board is right. What I'm saying is that let's get the information and then let's react to the information, right? And so with that said, are there any other public comments for this meeting? If not, we don't have any sort of executive session items. And so I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Can we do like a voice vote? Those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Meeting adjourned. Thank you all.
This has been a production of Lorain City Schools TV 20 WLCS.